But when it comes to the Trump administration, they rise to their highest level of criminality. A lot of these people are going down. In many ways, the Trump administration is a sting operation. And on today's show, the fight for America continues. With or without you, the train has left the station. You can lick your wounds. You can tune out. I know some people are they've given up. But this is happening with or without you. There are a lot of quacks. Bobby Kennedy, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, Dr. Oz, who are about to get way more attention than they can handle. They will be exposed. And they will be destroyed because they're reckless and dangerous. All that on today's show. Plus, at the very end, I'm going to teach you how to read. A lot of people don't know how to read. I'm going to teach you how to read. Politico reports Democrats are now looking at a net gain of 2 seats in the House of Representatives in the new Congress, which begins on January 3rd. The Democrats gained, it looks like, 2 seats. 3 races have yet to be called, but now it's looking like a 220 to 250 Republican majority. This is very important because all it takes is 3 Republicans to kill Trump's agenda in the House, especially those tax cuts for the richest 1%. They're due to expire next year. Trump not only plans to renew those tax cuts, he's hoping to make them even deeper. And that's going to be a hard sell for the fiscal hawks in the GOP because you cannot cut taxes without adding to the debt. It's no longer a given that Trump's tax cuts are going to happen. But wait, it gets worse for Trump's agenda. Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz is gone. His seat won't be filled until after May's special election. Elise Stefanik is leaving Congress to become UN ambassador. That's another vacancy. That's another seat that needs a special election before it can be filled. Mike Waltz is Trump's pick for national security advisor. He's leaving Congress too. So we're looking at a 217 to 215 majority during Trump's first 60 days. That means all it takes is one GOP defector. And what happens? You have a tie in the House, 216 to 216. Now, in the Senate, the vice president breaks tie votes. There's no tiebreaker in the House of Representatives. If there's a tie in the House, the bill fails. We may be looking at 0 pieces of legislation getting passed during Donald Trump's first 60 days in office and beyond. The switchboard operator for the House of Representatives is 202-224-3121. Call 202-224-3121 and then ask to speak to your member of Congress. Now, they know your area code. So calling a member of Congress from out of state doesn't carry as much weight as an area code from their state. If you have a New York area code, then you can call every member of the New York Congressional District. They can't parse districts from an area code. Leave a polite message. All it takes, right now it looks like all it's going to take is one Republican member of the House of Representatives to vote against renewing the Trump tax cuts, and they're gone. By May, it's going to be three House Republicans that you have to bother by calling them or sending postcards. So what's going on? Congress returns next week to wrap up a lame duck session, and that will convene until Christmas. The GOP-controlled House has to prevent, in the next few weeks, a government shutdown by the 20th of December. There's still no budget for the 2025 budget. It was supposed to have been passed on October 1st of this year. No budget. So they have until the 20th of December, to pass a continuing resolution. They're probably going to kick the farm bill down the road for another year. They need to pass a defense bill before Christmas. That's the Republican-controlled House. That's Mike Johnson's problem. But Democrats still control the Senate until July 3rd. And Ralph Nader is urging Democratic committee chairs in the Senate to convene hearings all the way up until January 3rd, when they must turn their gavel over to Republicans. Nader is urging Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, he's the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, to hold hearings on what Ralph Nader calls the corporate crime wave. Nader is urging Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, to hold hearings right now on funding the Internal Revenue Service to make certain the rich and powerful pay their taxes. Nader is also calling on Senator Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, to hold hearings right now on Medicare for All, with testimony highlighting why it would save money and lives. In the Senate, because they have the majority until January 3rd, all the chair people of the Senate committees are Democrats. There's use to be made of this lame duck session. After January 3rd, 2025, it's confirmation hearings. There's a new Congress, and what some of you need to be reminded of is that there are seasons to politics and government. And when you recognize the seasons, then you know what you have to do. Trump's first 100 days after January 20th are critical. He's got to get all his cabinet picks approved by the Senate, not by the House. The House doesn't approve the cabinet. The House is going to be working on a budget for 2025. They're going to be working on renewing his tax cuts. In the Senate, Trump's going to be trying to staff the executive branch. Senate confirmations are straight thumbs up or thumbs down. There's no filibuster. You don't need 60 to overcome a filibuster. It's a simple majority to get a nomination approved. But these hearings are going to be very intense because, first off, Trump's not using the FBI to perform background checks, which means people are going to come pouring out of the woodwork wanting to testify against all of Trump's nominees. As I've said earlier, it's going to be one Kavanaugh shit show after another. This is going to be the season. Starting on January 3rd, it will be the season to staff up the executive branch. And these committee chairs, all Republicans, holding these hearings will try to block most of these witnesses, expert witnesses, or women or men who claim so-and-so did this to me, or I saw him or her do this. The Democrats and the press will be fighting for these witnesses to testify. It's going to be very intense. All of Trump's nominees, all of them, are unqualified to run these government agencies. And they hold incredibly dangerous and unpopular positions, especially when it comes to public health. It's almost as though Donald Trump vetted his public health nominees by watching Joe Rogan's podcast. Trump's pick to head the Centers for Disease Control shares Bobby Kennedy's belief that there is a link between vaccines and autism. Trump picked Dr. Jay Bhattacharya to head the National Institutes of Health. He'd have, if he's approved, he'd have at his disposal $48 billion a year to oversee 27 medical research facilities looking into heart disease, cancer, and new viruses, like the next strain of COVID. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who Trump wants to head the CDC, co-authored 2020's Great Barrington Declaration, which called for herd immunity. Herd immunity. The Great Barrington Declaration was discredited by the entire medical community. The Great Barrington Declaration called on allowing young people to all contract COVID back in 2020 so they would develop herd immunity, while the medical establishment would just focus on treating older people, preventing COVID for older people or anyone suffering from comorbidities. Because we all know young people don't hang out with other young people who have comorbidities, and young people never visit their grandparents. Besides being a doctor, he's also an economist who obviously opposed shutting down the entire economy at the height of COVID. You might remember during the height of the pandemic, before the vaccine, there were crackpots like the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, who said the economy should remain opened and he'd be willing to die for his grandchildren's financial future. TV's Dr. Oz has been nominated for our nation's Medicare and Medicaid administrator. He's going to administer Medicare and Medicaid. These hearings are going to be humiliating for him. Last time he testified before the Senate, it was embarrassing. During the height of COVID, Dr. Oz urged people to take malaria drugs like hydrochloroquine and chloroquine. So he's going to rise to his highest level of charlatanery, chicanery, and it's going to be humiliating. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been nominated for Health and Human Services Secretary. Those hearings are going to be gripping because what's going on the healthcare front? Trump is opening up a national debate on what role snake oil salesmen who frequent Joe Rogan's podcast, what role they should play in our public health. This is a valuable service that he's providing, to put these guys under oath and have them explain themselves. The Food and Drug Administration was literally set up to put snake oil salesmen out of business. Trump's nominee for FDA commissioner is Dr. Martin A. Makary. He's a surgeon who opposed vaccine mandates during the height of COVID. I think he'll survive. To his credit, he called for universal masking. He's a big believer in masking. He called for that early on. And he did have a somewhat responsible position on COVID compared to these other picks. Dr. Dave Weldon is a former member of Congress who has been nominated to head the Centers for Disease Control. Like Bobby Kennedy, he has been a fierce advocate for the idea that thimerosal, a preservative in vaccines, is responsible for autism. This is a valuable service that Trump is providing. He's going to have to defend himself during the confirmation hearings. Janet Nishawat is Trump's pick for Surgeon General. She's a regular contributor to Fox News. She sells her own line of vitamins and is one of the directors of CityMD, which was fined $12 million by the Department of Justice for fraudulently filing for government reimbursements for COVID tests back in 2020. The FBI confirmed that several of Trump's cabinet picks were the subject of bomb threats and swatting earlier in the week before Thanksgiving. 5 congressional Democrats from Connecticut were subjected to bomb threats on Thanksgiving. Senator Chris Murphy and Congress members Jim Hines, Joe Courtney, John Larson, and Jahana Hayes all reported receiving bomb threats on Thanksgiving. Trump's transition team denied on Friday earlier reports he was planning to discharge all transgender troops from the Army through executive order. Trump's transition team is transitioning. They probably don't even know which bathrooms to use. So we'll find out when he becomes president if he's going to persecute the transgender soldiers. This is the mop-up for November 30th, 2024. Please like this episode and share it. That's the best way to help me. Subscribe to my channel and my newsletter. Check out the garbage for sale at shopdavidfeldman.com. Trump.com, like this coffee mug. It's Donald Trump's mugshot on a coffee mug. It's a coffee mugshot. Or this picture of Albert Einstein, and he's saying, "I'm surrounded by idiots." I hate this, but it's, something you buy if you want something for your office. Or the Donald Trump as the God farter. You might want to buy that. Or a no union busting Starbucks coffee mug. I love that. No union busting coffee mug. And it's got the doctored Starbucks logo on it. Several Starbucks unions recognized by the NLRB. Starbucks still not negotiating with the unions in direct violation of the law. The Australian Senate voted to ban social media for children under the age of 16 this week. The Australian House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly in favor of the same measure earlier in the week. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said after this bill was passed, quote, "Platforms now have a social responsibility to ensure the safety of our kids, to make sure that's a priority for them." Unquote. Social platforms like Facebook, Reddit, and TikTok have exactly 1 year to figure out how to keep Australian children off their sites. Otherwise, they will face millions of dollars in fines. Israel and Hezbollah accused each other on Friday of violating their 2-day-old truce, but it seems to be holding. The Associated Press reports that for the first time since 2016, insurgents have invaded Aleppo, Syria's largest city. Government troops were completely taken by surprise and suffered major losses as that nation's civil war now enters its 14th year. Since fighting first broke out back in 2011, millions of refugees began pouring into neighboring Lebanon, Turkey, as well as Europe. Germany welcomed them. Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro told the Wall Street Journal yesterday that Donald Trump's return to power will soon facilitate his return to power. After losing re-election in 2022, Bolsonaro hung out with Trump at Mar-a-Lago and frequently consults with Steve Bannon, who loves authoritarians like Bolsonaro. Brazil's Supreme Court banned Bolsonaro from holding elective office until 2030, when he falsely claimed voter fraud after his 2022 defeat. Brazil's police earlier this month charged Bolsonaro with inciting an attempted coup in January of 2023 when his supporters responded to his defeat by storming Brazil's Capitol buildings. Bolsonaro told the Wall Street Journal he thinks Trump will put enough pressure on Brazil so that the government will relax his 6-year suspension from politics. When it comes to our economy, Joe Biden leaves office as the most successful president in American history. By every yardstick, from unemployment and now even inflation, Biden has created the best economy this country has ever seen for half this country. Half this country does not benefit from our economy, which is why Kamala Harris lost. But for the half of this country for whom this economy works, no president has done a better job. And he continues to grow this economy. Bloomberg reports that third quarter results are in, with America's economy growing at a 2.8% clip during the third quarter. Trump, like he did, will inherit a great economy and destroy it. According to the latest Nielsen averages, MSNBC viewership has dropped nearly 38% since the election as liberals check out. Meanwhile, Fox News viewership is up 40%. Nielsen says nearly 3/4 of all cable news audiences are watching Fox News as liberals and Democrats just curl up in a bowl and stop paying attention. CNN's viewership is down 27% since the election after Comcast announced it was spinning off MSNBC as a separate company. Elon Musk has reportedly expressed interest in purchasing MSNBC. Elon Musk spent Thanksgiving at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump is starting to see Musk as the son he never had. Successful. All right. Trump's enemies are now the enemies of the world's richest man, Elon Musk, who accused the newly elected Democratic congressional candidate Eugene Vindman of treason and implied that Vindman should be shot for treason. Vindman, you might remember, served as deputy legal advisor to the National Security Council and was the whistleblower who reported Donald Trump's perfect phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky back in 2019. That was when Trump held up a shipment of arms to Ukraine in exchange for dirt on Joe and Hunter Biden. This resulted in Trump's first impeachment. And here is the tweet from Elon Musk. Vindman is on the payroll of Ukrainian oligarchs and has committed treason against the United States, for which he will pay the appropriate penalty. Well, Musk is out of control, and he is rising to his highest level of criminality. This sentence, he committed treason against the United States, for which he will pay the appropriate penalty. This is from a man who's spending Thanksgiving with Donald Trump. This is a threat to have Congressman-elect Vindman shot for treason. Unbelievable. As leader of Donald Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk this week called for the elimination of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Well, of course he did. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the brainchild of Senator Elizabeth Warren. It was established in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. It protects Americans from predatory lenders, shady bankers, and dishonest financial advisors, or as Donald Trump calls them, my new cabinet. Responding to Musk's threat, Robert Weissman, head of Public Citizen, said the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is way too popular and it's entrenched in law. Therefore, it will not be eliminated by Trump or Musk. Robert Weissman, head of Public Citizen, also said, quote, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been a model of government efficiency, returning almost $20 billion to consumers who were cheated by bank and financial corporation wrongdoing, unquote. Weissman over Public Citizen also implied that Elon Musk has a personal stake in eliminating the Bureau. This is a conflict of interest because Twitter explores brand new financial avenues of encouraging users to make online purchases. Each day, Twitter is trying to engage users into activity that falls under the purview of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Well, former CBS anchor and PBS talk show Charlie Rose has settled 3 sexual harassment lawsuits filed against him in 2017. What's the rush? By 2018, close to 40 women accused Charlie Rose of sexual and verbal harassment as well as groping, but nobody at CBS saw anything. Nobody saw anything. Former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, said he is exploring a run for mayor of New York City next year. Cuomo was forced to step down as governor in 2021 after countless women accused him of sexual harassment and inappropriate touching, but nobody saw anything until they did. Rudy Giuliani is being sued for wage theft and rape, and he has yet to turn over the title of his 1980 Mercedes, as well as the co-op shares for his multi-million-dollar apartment. He's supposed to turn these over to those two Georgia election workers who won a $153 million defamation judgment against Giuliani after he repeatedly accused them, and he's still accusing them, of stuffing ballots for Joe Biden in 2020. Without the title to the car or the co-op shares to this multi-million-dollar apartment, 10-bedroom apartment in New York. Without the co-op shares, the two women are unable to sell the apartment. Giuliani was warned this week by the judge in the case that time is quickly running out, and if he doesn't cooperate, jail is next. Multi-billionaire Reid Hoffman, who was the last of the big donors to call for Biden not to drop out. He said Joe Biden should stay in the race. He should stay the course. He is now reportedly terrified of the incoming Trump administration's Justice Department, and he's considering getting out of the country. This is the problem with billionaires influencing the Democratic Party. In the end, they're cowards. He's going to leave America. He's not going to stick around and fight for the country. Unbelievable. On Wednesday, the American Civil Liberties Union, also known as the ACLU, called on Joe Biden before leaving office to close any ICE detention center found to have egregious human rights violations. You mean every one of them? The ACLU says during the first Trump administration, ICE opened 40 new detention facilities, all of which were privately owned for-profit jails. The ACLU says ICE currently detains 37,000 people a day. 43 inmates have died during the past 4 years, and the ACLU says 90% of those deaths were due to lack of proper medical care and could have been prevented, but for-profit detention centers do not want to spend the money on keeping their inmates healthy. They don't want to pay for doctors or nurses or drugs. The ACLU says most ICE facilities are for-profit, and that GEO Group, the largest for-profit prison corporation, made $1.05 billion off ICE contracts in 2022. They were also the first corporation to donate to Donald Trump this year. They set up a massive super PAC and donated hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to Donald Trump. In 2019, Senator Lindsey Graham and Vice President Mike Pence toured a for-profit ICE detention facility in Texas. Josh Dawsey of the Washington Post accompanied Lindsey Graham and Vice President Mike Pence on the tour of that for-profit detention center. Dawsey wrote that he saw 384 men sleeping inside fences on concrete with no pillows or mats. The inmates, told him they hadn't showered in weeks. They wanted toothbrushes and food. He, as well as other reporters, called the stench overwhelming. ICE insisted the inmates were fed regularly and could brush their teeth daily, and said they recently got access to a shower because the press was coming, but it still stunk. Many hadn't showered for 20 days. He writes that the guards later conceded that it had been days, if not weeks, since the inmates were given deodorant, toothpaste, and soap. Lindsey Graham, as I said, was on the tour and later said back in 2019, I don't care if they have to stay in these facilities for 400 days. We're not going to let those men go that I saw. It would be dangerous. Sure it would. You make them dangerous. You create terrorists. They're not terrorists, but and they're not dangerous. But when you treat people as subhuman, they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. These people are people and should be released. They are not a threat to the community. Well, I owe an apology. I'm a little scared, like Reid Hoffman, who's leaving the country. I went after Tom Homan. He was the head of ICE during the Trump administration. He's considered the father of the family separation policy. Homan, Thomas Homan, will serve as Trump's new border czar and recently threatened to arrest the mayor of Denver. He said, if you interfere with ICE rounding up undocumented women and children, I will arrest you. And I would like to apologize to the very powerful, soon-to-be border czar, Tom Homan, because on a previous show, I implied that because Tom Homan looks like a diseased chode, he has to pay for sex. And that was disrespectful and uncalled for, so I apologize. I also want to apologize for saying Tom Homan's daughter has a face that looks like a catcher's mitt. I didn't even know if Tom Homan had a daughter. In fact, I assumed, given that Tom Homan looks and smells like 6-week-old boiled cabbage, I assumed that he couldn't conceive a child, since no woman would ever want to get next to Tom Homan. They don't make a gas mask powerful enough to be intimate with Tom Homan. But apparently he does have a daughter. So again, I apologize to Tom Homan and his daughter, whose name is Ditch Pig. This is his daughter, Ditch Pig Homan. As you can see, hi, Ditch Pig. I don't know what that is. That's Ditch Pig Homan. That would be soon-to-be border czar Tom Homan's daughter. I want to apologize for saying on the last show that Ditch Pig Homan has a face that looks like a worn-out catcher's mask that's taken way too many fastballs down the middle. Hi, Ditch Pig Homan. Do you accept my apology? Oh, okay. By the way, that is not flatulence. We don't do flatulence on the show. That's the sound of the fifth cat that Ditch Pig Homan is sitting on. That's the sound of Ditch Pig Homan, her fifth cat, trying to breathe. But that was not flatulence. Wait. Tom Homan, border czar, has something. What is this? He has another correction. He says his wife doesn't have the face of a used catcher's mitt either. Okay. I apologize. This is border czar Tom Homan's wife. Please say hello to Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan. Odd first name for a woman, but this is Mrs. Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan. Hello, Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan. Hi, thank you for, again, my apology. Hang on. Tom Homan, future border czar Tom Homan, has a message for his wife, Bucket of Smashed Crabs. He says, tell everyone about how Arnold Palmer once came on to you. Wow, is that true? Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan? The golfer? Arnold Palmer once came on to you? Is that true? Hello? Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan is... Okay, she's... message from Tom Homan. He's saying, do it now. Don't make me angry, Bucket of Smashed Crabs. Okay, please don't make your husband, soon-to-be border czar, Tom Homan, angry at you. Go ahead, Bucket of Smashed Crabs Homan, wife of Tom Homan, tell us how golfer Arnold Palmer once came on to you. This is, again, I apologize. Apparently, golfer Arnold Palmer once flirted with Bucket of Smash Crabs Homan. Please, go ahead.
Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women. And I love women, but this is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there. They said, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." I had to say it. But we have women that are highly sophisticated here. But they used to look at Arnold. They said, "Man, but he was really something special. Arnold was something special." So I just want to tell you, you're very lucky. And I had to tell you the shower part of it, because it's true. What can I tell you? We want to be honest. We want to be upfront. It's true.
Thank you, Bucket of Smash Crabs Homan. That is the wife of the former head of ICE, Tom Homan, soon to be border czar under Donald Trump. And my apologies to his wife and daughter. This is the mop-up for November 30th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Please share this episode. That's the best way to help me. Please like it so I remain in your feed. And follow me on Blue Sky. Yes, follow me on Blue Sky as I migrate against Twitter, which I was never on. Bill Clinton says after Hillary's loss in 2016, he couldn't sleep for 2 years. Donald Trump talked with the Mexican president yesterday. She said after the conversation, a trade war will be averted. There's not going to be, I've been wrong before, but I'm drinking from my worst case scenario mug. I don't think there are going to be tariffs. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago Friday night. The two ate dinner for 3 hours. Trump is threatening 25% tariffs unless Canada does something about the immigrants and drugs coming over the border. Well, the ACLU called on Joe Biden this week to commute the sentences of all 40 federal prisoners on death row. In 2020, Biden openly opposed the death penalty, making him the very first American president to take that position. The ACLU says people of color constitute more than half of those on federal death row. Many of them were convicted by all-white juries. According to the Associated Press, Joe Biden announced a pause on all federal executions during his first year in office. The Associated Press also reported that in his final 6 months as president, Donald Trump ordered a record-breaking 13 executions. Prior to that, there had been a 17-year pause in federal executions. The ACLU warns that Donald Trump has proven himself a huge fan of the death penalty. According to Rolling Stone, privately and on the campaign trail, Donald Trump has called for public hangings and firing squads. The ACLU says Trump has also called for applying the death penalty for nonviolent offenses. You mean like being convicted for hiding hush money payments to a porn star? Huh? The Associated Press reported in 2019 that Attorney General Bill Barr approved the use of pentobarbital for executions. This, despite evidence that pentobarbital causes pulmonary edema, which before killing the inmate recreates the sensation of drowning, kind of like Bill Barr's acid reflux. The Associated Press reported 2 years ago that although witnesses were allowed inside all 13 Trump executions, details remained murky. AP reports one Trump execution took place despite the inmate being described as mentally disabled. He was also recuperating from a severe COVID infection inside his lungs. After being administered the lethal injection, it took 20 minutes for him to die as he writhed in pain. The Associated Press reported that an autopsy eventually revealed, as he died, the inmate suffered from pulmonary edema as fluid poured from his mouth. This created a 20-minute slow-motion drowning sensation. Federal executions are conducted inside the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. The ACLU reports that among the 13 executed by Donald Trump, there was an inmate suffering from Alzheimer's disease. He killed somebody with Alzheimer's disease, as well as a woman who had suffered a lifetime of rape and torture. Probably an ex-girlfriend. 7 of the 13 executed were black men. Another was Native American. 2 of the black men were sentenced to death as teenagers. 2 black men that he executed were sentenced to death as teenagers. Not surprising that Donald Trump would execute them. Remember the Central Park Five? Or as they're known now as the Exonerated Five? Trump's lawyers last week petitioned a federal judge to toss out a defamation lawsuit filed against him by the Central Park Five, now known as the Exonerated Five, because they were falsely imprisoned after they were wrongfully convicted of raping a jogger in Central Park back in 1989. They were teenagers. Trump famously took out ads in all the major New York City newspapers calling for the death penalty to be restored in New York State in order to execute these teenagers for what he called this brutal rape. The 5 black teenagers served 13 years in prison and then were released after new DNA evidence proved their innocence. The city of New York ended up paying them a $40 million settlement, and one was just elected to the New York City Council. Trump has been repeatedly asked if he would like to apologize to the Exonerated Five for his full-page ads calling for their executions. He refuses. And so the Exonerated Five sued him last month after once again he refused to apologize during his debate with Kamala Harris in September. Trump, during the debate, refused to apologize. Instead, he said in front of millions of people on national television, quote, "I have nothing to apologize for. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately, and they pled guilty. Then they pled not guilty," unquote. Well, the jogger was not killed. So they didn't kill a person ultimately. And they never pled guilty. They were pressured into confessing after homicide detectives held them for 7 hours, but they retracted their confessions within days, and they never pled guilty. They are now suing Donald Trump for defamation. Lawyers for Trump said Donald Trump was merely repeating the best available evidence. They should sue Trump's lawyers for defamation as well. Earlier this year, a jury in Manhattan ordered Donald Trump to pay journalist E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million after a previous jury ruled that Trump had defamed E. Jean Carroll after sexually assaulting her. Twice, the judge in this case put into writing that Donald Trump was found guilty by the jury, found guilty of quote-unquote rape in common law parlance, unquote. The judge said due to the nature of the civil lawsuit, it had to be referred to as sexual assault. But he said it was, quote unquote, rape in common law parlance. The Supreme Court ruled in Clinton v. Paula Jones that sitting presidents can be sued in civil court for damages inflicted before they took office. So the Exonerated Five's civil suit that just got filed, it will be able to proceed since Donald Trump made these comments in September of this year during the debate while he was no longer president. Like I said at the top of the show, the train is leaving with or without you. You want to curl up into a ball, or do you want to fight for America? This fight for America is going to continue with or without you. Okay? So I know everybody's licking wounds and they're depressed and you're in mourning and it's not even a month since Kamala Harris lost. But some of us are really looking forward to the next year. The next year. A lot of people got exposed and destroyed during Donald Trump's first 4 years. His administration is a honeypot. It's a sting operation. The worst of the worst are drawn to him. He's a magnet. And it's important to keep him around, to catch all these criminals or quacks and frauds and idiots. Well, Congressman Katie Porter, according to Politico, has gotten a restraining order for her ex-boyfriend. She's been on this show. Big fan of Congresswoman Katie Porter. The ex-boyfriend reportedly kept leaving messages threatening to, quote-unquote, shatter your life into a million pieces. Politico reports Congresswoman Porter told the judge that the ex-boyfriend left 1,000 threatening messages in the past 3 months. All right. I'm going to teach you how to read. How are we doing on time? Thank you for joining me. Please like this episode. A lot of young people don't know how to read. I mean, they can read, but they don't know how to read critically. So I'm going to show you how to read. I'm going to show you an example of non-evidence-based writing from a Harvard graduate named Seth Moulton. And you might remember Seth Moulton claims to be a Democrat. He's from Massachusetts. He's also a Harvard a-hole. And he's been blaming Kamala Harris's loss on, quote, Democrats losing touch with the majority of Americans. He complains that Democrats have a habit of preaching down to people, and that's why Kamala Harris lost on November 5th. So here's an article. It's kind of popular over at the Washington Post. Opinion, I'm done with Democratic purity tests. A growing number of Democrats want to widen our tent and win again. It's written by Congressman Seth Moulton. Okay? Zero evidence. No fact-based writing here. It says, I'm done with the Democratic purity tests. Well, you should be done with the Democratic Party. You should just go join the Republicans. So, purity tests. I've never administered or been given a purity test by anybody from Kamala Harris's campaign. Can you give me an example of what a purity test means? What does widen our tent mean? It says we have to widen our tent to win again. Does that mean appealing to conservatives? Does it mean appealing to the poor and the working poor, or just appealing to conservatives like you? Okay, let's read on. Here we go. Since Election Day, this is his opening paragraph. Since Election Day, I've learned two things about the Democratic Party. The word police will continue to patrol no matter how badly we lose, and a growing number of us are finally ready to move beyond them to start winning again. The word police. Nobody's policing your words. It's your ideas. We object to your delivery system. Words are a delivery system. Nobody is patrolling your language. It's what you say. But this is what people from Harvard who have a sense of entitlement, when you disagree with them, then you're the word police trying to censor them. The word police. Seth Moulton came under fire because he said he was concerned about transgender high school athletes hurting his daughter on the playing field. And he said, we should be able to discuss this. That's why so many people didn't vote for Kamala Harris, because we can't discuss legitimate fears of transgender high school athletes competing with our daughters. So nobody was policing your words. We were policing your idea, which is to scapegoat non-existent transgender high school athletes. There's no such thing as transgender high school athletes. They're like 360 million Americans. And according to the reporting I've read, there are 3 transgender high school athletes. Every time you ask a Republican, give me an example of a transgender high school athlete, they can't come up with one. So nobody's censoring you. There's no word police. We're disagreeing with you. But you're in such a bubble of Harvard privilege. If someone challenges Seth Moulton, they're the word police. We're censorious. Let's continue. This is what bad writing is. 2 days, this is the second paragraph, 2 days after Donald Trump's victory, I gave an example of how Democrats spend too much time trying not to offend anyone. Really? We're concerned about not offending anyone? So they taught you at Harvard to make blanket statements without backing that up. You can just get away with that at Harvard? Too much time not to offend anyone, even on issues where most Americans feel the same way. Well, most Americans feel the same way on what? Most Americans feel the same way on, quote, speaking as a dad, I said I didn't like the idea of my 2 girls one day competing against biological boys on a playing field. One day. So it's not an issue. One day means your daughters have never competed against biological boys on a playing field. You just don't like that idea. He goes on to say, my main point, though, is what I said next. Quote, as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Yes, as a Democrat, you should be afraid to be stupid and to be scapegoating the transgender community and prioritizing something that doesn't exist. Transgender high school athletes don't exist. What is your main point, Seth Moulton? He continues. It's amazing. This is a Harvard education. He continues. The blowback, which was swift, included the chair of a local Democratic committee calling me a Nazi cooperator and about 200 people gathering in front of my office to protest a sentence. Yes, one sentence. Yes, isn't that amazing? It's just a sentence where you threw the transgender community under the bus. And so that's your example of not being allowed to be a bigot. The chair of a local Democratic committee called him a Nazi cooperator. He goes on, this is just the sense of entitlement. My unimpeachable record of standing up for the civil rights of all Americans, including the trans community, was irrelevant. Your unimpeachable record? Apparently it's impeachable. Apparently you don't stand up for the civil rights of all Americans, including the trans community. When you go out of your way to scapegoat non-existing transgender high school athletes, yeah, that's not standing up for the transgender community. That's scapegoating them. So you're going to get protests. In Salem, here's what happened. Salem, Massachusetts, it's part of his district. The Democratic City Committee Chair, Liz Bratt, sent him a private email, which was private. And she said, this kind of language is what is known as being a cooperator during Nazi times. That's what she said in a private email, which he then made public and played the victim and said, people are calling me a Nazi cooperator. No, in private. Somebody sent him an email, and then he went public with it. And maybe they didn't teach you this at Harvard, but the transgender community was the first to go in Nazi Germany. So even though Liz Bratt in private called you a Nazi cooperator, you are cooperating with the persecution of the transgender community, which is what authoritarian fascist regimes do. They persecute the weakest members, the most marginalized members of a community. So yeah, you're cooperating with them. So I have a question for Seth Moulton. Instead of taking a stand on transgender high school athletes, which is not a real thing, what's your stand on this? This is real. And it's the reason Democrats have gotten accused of being too pro-transgender. Why? Because the transgender community is under assault by the Republican Party. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, headline from the Columbus Dispatch this week, signed a bill to restrict bathroom access for transgender students. See, the straw man argument that Seth Moulton makes is, I worry about the possibility that my daughter will have to share a playing field with a biological male. That's not a real issue. The real issue is, do you have a problem with your daughter sharing a bathroom with a quote unquote biological man, right? This is so typical of chicken shit Democrats like Seth Moulton, who nibble around the issues but won't address the real question. Where do you stand, Seth Moulton, on bathroom access for transgender students? That's the question, but you wouldn't dare address that. Let's go on. I want to teach people how to read critically. This prick goes on to write, what has amazed me, though, is what's happening behind the scenes. Receipts, please. I need receipts for this paragraph. Proof. Didn't they teach you how to footnote, to give examples at Harvard, you prick? What amazed me, though, is what's happening behind the scenes. Countless Democrats have reached out. Name one. Countless Democrats have reached out from across the party to thank me. Name one. I've heard it again and again. Oh, there's your proof. I've heard it again and again. From union leaders to colleagues in the House and Senate, from top people from the Obama, Biden, Harris teams to local Democrats stopping me on the street, from fellow dads to many in the LGBTQ plus community. saying, thank you for saying that. Give me an example. Give me an example. I think you're a liar. You have to back up your statements with facts. But they didn't teach that at Harvard, did they? Let's continue. How do I go big here? The question of whether to have reasonable restrictions on transgender women's participation in women's sports wasn't their point, though most agree, just as it wasn't mine. It wasn't my point. Where do you stand on transgender bathrooms, Seth Moulton? Forget women's participation in high school sports or transgender women. That's a straw man. Where do you stand on transgender bathrooms? That's an actual issue, but you wouldn't dare, you chicken shit Harvard a-hole. He's talking about these fictitious people who thanked him. He's a liar. Nobody thanked him. He's a liar. They, these people who don't exist, were simply glad that a fellow Democrat would violate the moratorium on speaking our minds. There's a moratorium on speaking our minds? Nobody told me that. No, we might criticize Democrats who speak their simple minds. I never got a moratorium order. Okay? This is just garbage writing. Voters want elected officials to give voice to their concerns, not tell them what to think. Telling you what to think. You mean politics is not about advocating for what you believe? Members of a political party that speak up for the LGBTQ community is telling Seth Moulton what to think? That's how it works, a-hole. That's what politics is. We disagree with how you think. I know in your Harvard bubble of privilege, you can't believe that anybody would challenge you and accuse you of being a bigot. So by challenging you, we're telling you how to think. Yes, that's why we're not only challenging your statement, but we're going to do a primary challenge against you. We don't like the way you think. We don't like the way you talk about the transgender community. We don't like how you scapegoat them with non-existent issues like transgender high school athletes. Okay? Nobody's telling you, forbidding you from thinking a certain way. We're just telling you, if you think a certain way, get the F out of the Democratic Party. That's how it works. Until not so long ago, he writes, we were the party of free speech. Really. We're censoring you because we're criticizing you. Interesting. This is what Republicans say. We welcomed real rigorous debate. Unless the debate was against me, then it's censorship. We welcomed real rigorous debate when orthodox conservatives in the Republican Party were afraid of change. We raised the struggles of the working class to become national issues. Really, says the man who ran for president in 2020 and said Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were too radical because they wanted Medicare for all and free tuition at all public universities. How do you help the working class? He continues. That's how we delivered Social Security and Medicare when wealthy Americans already had good health care and retirement savings. That's how we protected people with pre-existing conditions under Obamacare against staunch Republican opposition, and it's how we expanded freedoms by allowing women to make their own health care decisions and everyone to marry whomever they love, changing the status quo. Where do you begin with this? This is what a $200,000 education at Harvard gets you. Okay, that's how we delivered Social Security and Medicare. The Social Security was Roosevelt in the 30s. Medicare was Lyndon Johnson in 65. Different Democratic Party. Okay, that's how we protected people with pre-existing conditions under Obamacare. Obamacare isn't something to be proud of. It's just okay. And yes, pre-existing conditions, that's great, but it's not free. We still have to pay for it. Obamacare is popular because nobody offers an alternative like a public option or Medicare for all. And then he says, how we expanded freedoms by allowing women to make their own health care decisions. You mean abortion. You can't even say the word abortion. It's how we expanded freedoms by allowing women to make their own health care decisions. The Democrats didn't expand abortion freedoms. The Supreme Court did. The Supreme Court did. The Democrats didn't do that. But if you graduated from Harvard, you can just say things. He can't even say abortion. It's how we expanded freedoms by allowing women to make their own health care decisions and everyone to marry whomever they love. He can't even say gay marriage. And Democrats didn't legalize same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court did. So you're taking credit for something the Roberts Court accomplished, which is legalizing same-sex. This is what a Harvard education gets you. You can just make blanket false statements and take credit for same-sex marriage being legalized. Democrats didn't do that. The Roberts Court did it. Justice Kennedy wrote that. And he concludes, in every case, we listened, we built trust, and we welcomed those who disagreed into our expanding tent, the definition of a majority party. No, it's not. No, it's not. When you fish for Republicans and conservatives, and when you're Seth Moulton parroting the bigotry of Republicans, you create a smaller tent. That's why we lost. What does he say? Independents and Republicans, hang on, where are we here? Where am I? Just 12 years ago, we even nominated a Democrat who was against gay marriage for president. Yes, you nominated Barack Obama, who was against gay marriage. And he did nothing. He's not responsible for gay marriage being legalized. The court did that. Kennedy did that. This guy. Independents and Republicans see what we do to fellow Democrats, me, who disagree with the party line. Why would they think they'd have a prayer with us? We don't want them. We don't want Republicans in the party. We don't want you in the party. Independents are just people who are too chicken shit to admit that they're voting for Trump. They keep it to themselves. He continues. Trump, for all his bluster and lies, sees and understands real fears. No, he creates fears. He created the imaginary crime wave in this country, non-existent crime wave, the non-existent migrant caravan that's coming to rape and commit acts of terrorism. He doesn't see and understand real fears. He creates false ones. Quote, this is what Seth Moulton writes, when Americans worried about crime, he promised to support cops, even though his White House budget didn't deliver. Some Democrats, meanwhile, called to defund the police. Who? AOC? What? 3 Democrats said in 2020 we need to reimagine the police and defund. There were no Democrats running for office on defund the police. There were like a handful of Democrats in the House in 2020 who were saying we need to reimagine how we fund our city governments, and we need to give less money to the police and more money to social workers to help out civilians before they turn to crime. Defund the police. So he cites like 3 members of Congress in 2020 from deep blue districts who were bold enough to say, we need to reimagine the police. Some Democrats, meanwhile, called to defund the police. When voters said they were tired of violence, shoplifting, and a growing sense of disorder in their communities, some of us held up national and historical data to prove their feelings were wrong. He goes, some of us held up national historical data, i.e. irrelevant, to prove their feelings were wrong. Data is irrelevant. That's what they teach you at Harvard? I mean, look at this. When voters said they were tired of violence, shoplifting, and a growing sense of disorder in their communities, some of us held up national historical, i.e. irrelevant data to prove their feelings were wrong. In other words, he's complaining that Democrats didn't go along with Donald Trump's false narrative. Crime decreased under Joe Biden. The murder rate decreased under Joe Biden. Donald Trump is a liar. Fox News lies. Local news, if it bleeds, it leads. It is the role of the Democratic Party to explain that violent crime is actually down and you shouldn't be afraid. But Seth Moulton, with his Harvard education, is saying we should address the American people's fears based on nothing. That we try to prove their feelings were wrong. All of a sudden, Seth Moulton is concerned about the feelings of low information Republicans who feel scared. They feel scared because they're stupid. They listen to Donald Trump and watch Fox News. So what is Seth Moulton's answer politically? We should agree with Donald Trump's lie that there's a crime wave and you should be afraid and we should waste money and throw it at cops. That's what Seth Moulton is saying. As grocery prices soared, the Biden administration told us not to worry because it was transitory, whatever that means. Transitory means fleeting. It'll be taken care of, which it is. It's down to about above 2%. This is the big wrap. About 2/3 of Americans went on to say that inflation caused moderate or severe financial hardship in their lives. Trump made lowering inflation a cornerstone of his campaign, a key message regardless of what his policies will actually do. All Joe Biden talked about was inflation. All Kamala Harris talked about was inflation, about price gouging. Greedflation, that's all they talked about. In fact, Seth Moulton, I don't know if they taught you to read at Harvard, but why don't you check out Kamala Harris's platform? A New Way Forward for the Middle Class. You might want to try reading it or have somebody read it to you. This is the first page of Kamala Harris's platform. The rap against her by conservatives and the Democratic Party is Democrats didn't address inflation. Okay, table of contents. Section 1, lower costs for middle-class families. Subsection 1, cut taxes for working people. 2, lower food and grocery costs. 3, lower healthcare costs. 4, lower prescription drug costs. 5, lower energy costs. 6, lower costs by protecting consumers from fees and fraud. You see the one word here? What is the common denominator? What's the word you see in every subsection? Costs. But Seth Moulton said Kamala Harris and the Democrats wouldn't address inflation. Why don't you try listening to Joe Biden? Why don't you try listening to Kamala Harris? Why don't you try reading your own party's platform? He says, when Democrats don't engage honestly on real issues important to Americans, you mean like transgender high school athletes? We give the impression that we either don't understand or, worse yet, simply don't care. I don't know how much more Kamala Harris could have talked about inflation. That was one of her chief economic policies, going after greedflation. According to one exit poll, the number one reason swing voters chose Trump was, quote, Harris is focused more on cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. One exit poll, I looked at the poll he cited, of swing voters. These are swing voters who were asked in November. These are people who haven't yet made up their mind in November, and we should care what they think. You know what a swing voter is in November of 2024? An effing moron, just like Seth Moulton. A swing voter is someone who's looking for an excuse to vote for Donald Trump, who doesn't want to say, I'm a bigot, so maybe I'm voting for Trump because Kamala Harris doesn't focus on the middle class. Unbelievable. Worse, when we remain silent, I love this, and then I'm done. Worse, when we remain silent in the face of GOP attacks, rather than decisively putting them to bed and moving on, as when the Harris campaign went weeks without even acknowledging Trump's devastating anti-trans ad. Not only do we lose elections, but these issues get defined and decided entirely on Republican terms. There's no greater disservice to the people whose rights we claim to want to protect. Wow. There's no greater disservice to the people whose rights we claim to want to protect than by not responding to those advertisements with a full-throated wavering on the rights we claim to want to protect. Respond to that anti-trans ad. How, Seth Moulton? Give me the language. Give me the language to respond to that bigotry and stupidity. What? We support the rights of the transgender community, but not a lot. But not a lot. Give me the language, you a-hole. But the American people voted for Trump because he articulated a vision, however twisted and unconscionable, for solving their problems and addressing their fears. No, he created imaginary fears and imaginary problems that we as Democrats are not going to dignify. The good news for Democrats is we have a proud history of raising the challenges of working Americans and helping solve them. When we didn't do this by telling voters what to think or how to feel, we didn't do this by telling voters what to think or how to feel, but by listening when they told us. So Seth Moulton has no idea what leadership is. Leadership, Trump is a leader. He's leading us off a cliff. Leadership is telling Roosevelt, Kennedy, Johnson, leadership, we're going to integrate the schools because it's the right thing to do. We're going to give grandma and grandpa Medicare because it's the right thing to do. That's what leadership is. Leadership isn't, what is this? He says it's listening and addressing people's fears. Unbelievable. So, again, Seth Moulton, you can't even say the word abortion. You can't say same-sex marriage. You can't call for Medicare for all. You are not in any way remotely related to Roosevelt, Kennedy, or Johnson, or Hubert Humphrey. You just claim to have some association with the working class because you talk to a couple of your bigoted friends who are concerned about transgender athletes competing with your daughter. So you think you know what the working class is thinking. Here, very simple. Here we go. Ready? Medicare for all, Seth Moulton. You want to get the middle class, the working class, and the poor to vote for Democrats? Medicare for all. But you're against that. Free tuition at all public universities. But you're against that. Tax oil companies out of existence. But you're against that. You're against raising the minimum wage to $20. You're against repealing Taft-Hartley, which would make it much easier for workers to organize. You're against postal banking. We used to have postal banking. That way, the banks had to compete and couldn't get away with charging exorbitant fees, but you're against postal banking. You're against repealing the Faircloth Amendment, which, if we repealed it, the federal government could get back into the business of building low-income housing and creating affordable housing. But you're against that, Seth Moulton. You're against that. So what do? You create straw men. You cannot bring yourself to offer up anything that benefits the working class, the working poor, the 99%. So instead, you create this false narrative that we lost the working class because we talk down to them, because we tell them how to think, and we are for the transgender community. Well, he is going to be targeted. He's got to go. There are going to be primary challenges. This guy is a POS, and it's time to purge the Democratic Party of people like Seth Moulton. Let him go join the Republican Party. This is why I'm very optimistic. There are seasons to politics and government, and this is the season of fighting the other side and fighting each other. We will coalesce. When are midterms? 2026, right? We coalesce. and we fight whoever gets the Democratic nomination. If it's Seth Moulton, we fight for him. But right now, we fight against him. The same way the Republicans do. Look at the way the Republicans, quote unquote, cannibalize each other. Makes you stronger. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Well, I didn't do a short show. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it. That's the best way to help. And follow me on Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky. And go to shopdavidfeldman.com and pick up garbage that you don't need, like the Trump coffee mugshot, the coffee mugshot, or this, which I think is horrible, but I think if you need a mug as a gift at the office, it's the Albert Einstein mug where he says, "I'm surrounded by idiots." That you can give to people at the office and not get fired. The Godfarter coffee mug, and of course, no union busting coffee. It's for when you get a refill at Starbucks. They will not negotiate. They will not negotiate. They're in violation of the law. They will not negotiate with the unions. Pick up a 2029 souvenir from Donald Trump's inaugural ball. It's not too soon to pick up a Trump in 2028 coffee mug. If you're attending the inauguration, pick up a official Donald Trump fart filtration mask. It's what the pros use. A lot of people will be carrying an Appeal to Heaven flag to the inauguration. That's why you should go to Shop David Feldman and pick up an Appeal to These Nuts flag. Conquer the 7 mountains of These Nuts over at shopdavidfeldman.com. And here's Cassidy modeling my Still a Democrat, the Mope Up. Uncle David Feldman presents the Mope Still a Democrat coffee mug or T-shirt. This is my favorite, Donald Trump in Edvard Munch's The Scream. Great Christmas gift. It's the big seller. It's the chef's apron with the words, "I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." Jesus. And people buy it. I hope they continue to buy it. Thank you to Leonard. I think Leonard was helping out in the chat room this morning, my nephew Leonard. And thank you to Mila and Bob helping out in the chat room. Thank you for listening to me. So, it is Saturday morning. I am not going to do a show Sunday morning. I'm going to try not to do a show Monday morning. I want to take 2 days off because I'm really angry. I'm really pissed off. And I think I need to go hug a tree. So I think I'm going to take 2 days off. Maybe early Monday morning at 2:30, I'm going to do a show. But I have a feeling 2:30 Eastern Tuesday morning is when I return. That would be the healthy thing for me to do. Leave a comment. I read all your comments. Thank you for letting me do this show. Thank you.